Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's 4:00 p.m., so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. First, I'd like to say welcome and thank you for joining us today for our first board bootcamp session of 2022. Over the next hour, the focus of our discussion will be on recruiting new nonprofit board members. As you know, having an effective nonprofit board is a cornerstone of any good nonprofit organization, but how and where do you find good board members? And how do you recruit them to join your cause? That's what we're going to dive into today through our panel discussion. I will be our moderator this afternoon. My name is Genevieve Kirk, and I am the Center for Nonprofit Excellence Director at the Community Foundation of East Central Illinois, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. In addition to the grants and scholarships that the Community Foundation provides to the local community, we also aim to strengthen nonprofit organizations through training and resources, including this, our quarterly board bootcamp series. You can learn more about our work and upcoming trainings at our website, which is cfeci.org. So just a few quick housekeeping notes as we begin our session today. First, a friendly reminder to please mute your microphone during the session. We will offer a dedicated question and answer time following our panel discussion. So please be thinking about what questions you have that you'd like to ask of our panelists. At that time, we will prompt you to use the chat to submit your questions. And last, a note that this session is being recorded for the benefit of participants who could not attend our live Zoom session today. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our panelists. Today, we are welcoming Carrie Eisenmenger, who is the board chair of the United Way of Champaign County. Carrie also runs a financial planning practice with Northwestern Mutual. Tony Kirkman has served as the executive director of the Piatt County Mental Health Center since the summer of 2016. And Dr. Trina Wright-Dixon is past board chair and current trustee here at the Community Foundation of East Central Illinois. Dr. Wright-Dixon is also a teaching assistant professor in the Department of Communication at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Will you please join me in offering a virtual welcome to our panelists today? Thank you all for being here. And now I'd like to start our discussion by inviting each of our panelists to give us a brief introduction of yourself. And since our focus is on recruitment today, if you can also tell us how were you personally recruited to serve on a nonprofit board? And let's go in reverse order of introduction. So starting with Trina.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I had the honor of being invited to be a trustee on the board by the late Tom Costello. He was a colleague of mine at the University of Illinois in the Department of Communication. And if anyone knows Tom Costello, you know that he is was a very gregarious person, and you just really could not say no to him. However, I will say that the invitation that he gave was a very exciting one. It started out with a simple invitation, if you will, to lunch, and it ended with me just being enthralled with the conversation and the interest of the Community Foundation.
Super, thank you, Trina. Next, I'll ask Tony, same question.
Well, thank you for the invitation. So for the past 5.5 years, I've served as the director here at the Mental Health Center. And before that, I served for 10 years at a local nonprofit that oversaw a bunch of social services like counseling, adoption, and foster care. I've had the privilege of serving both as the administrator of a nonprofit, and then also I currently serve as on the Rotary Board here in Monticello for the Kirby Foundation, and have served as an elder at our church. So different functions for lots of different boards. And I think really my recruitment has been more giving the volunteer work for a year or so, and then having a board member extend an invitation after having a little bit of investment into the community.
Thank you, Tony. And Carrie, you're next.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Carrie Eisminger. I'm the current board chair for the United Way for one more day. I turn that over tomorrow at noon. So it's good that this happened today. I've been on the United Way board for 4 years, and I was really recruited. I joined the Emerging Community Leaders Program in 2012. From that experience, I started volunteering, working on committees, really worked in the power of the purse as we brought that to the community. And through that work, I joined the board about 4 years ago.
Super, thank you. Well, I'd like to thank you all for your participation today. And I'd like to jump into our time together with a few questions. First, to start with a statistic that I found in a recent board source survey, more than 58% of nonprofit leaders reported that it is difficult to recruit new board members. And only 73% of chief executives state that they have the right board members to effectively govern their organizations. So launching from these hard statistics, my first question to all of you, and you'd be welcome to go in any order, is why is board recruitment so challenging and so important? Anyone care to jump in first?
I can jump in. I can go first on this one. I won't go first on the next one. I would say I think board recruitment is important because it gives you the opportunity to hand select the team of advocates that you want to align yourself with to advance the mission of your organization. So I think that's very important work. I think it's challenging because we have a lot of amazing organizations in our community alone, and all of those organizations are looking for board members, they're looking for the volunteers. So you're challenged with finding these people who align with your mission, who meet the needs of your board at any given time. And then they also have to have the capacity to help and the capacity to be available at the point in time that you need them. I think that kind of creates this need for this board recruitment to be a long-term approach and really to need you to have a strategy around it that's not just when those board positions become available.
I would like to add to that.
Please.
Sorry. I like what Carrie had to say, but I think in addition to that, to me, it really is, because we have so many great organizations in the area, it is time. I can recall when I was recruited again, one of the things I was thinking is my children were at a younger age, and I knew the requirements of the Community Foundation, very early meetings. And to be quite honest, I had to really go back to my home and discuss that with my husband in terms of how are we going to navigate, or if you will, partner in terms of the days that I would have board meetings, who would take the kids to school, because that was primary for me as a mom or as us as a team to making sure I took my kid to school, but that's right in the prime hour, or if you will, of taking the kids during school. That said, time is an issue. And I know when we've had other board members, time can sometimes be tasking for others, I'll put it that way. The other issue is, I think the reason why we need to constantly recruit is innovative ideas. We constantly need newness, and to some degree, some boards can stay very stagnant. We'll just keep handpicking, if you will, folks that look like what we're used to. And so we don't get a little bit uncomfortable to stretch and grow.
Great points there, Trina. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that board recruitment is important. I think back to some of the older organizational leadership books like Jim Collins, his Good to Great book, where he's talking about not only do you need to make sure you have the right people on the bus, but you need to make sure that you have those right people in the right seats. And it's the exact same way for board recruitment. So, you need people who are actively engaged, not afraid to hold the leaders accountable to the mission and the vision, willing to share their time, talents, treasures, networks, but also to have a good understanding of the organization and really be willing to empathetically bleed for the cause. The board, in my mind, is the board sets the course, but they don't drive the bus. That's the director's job. And sometimes, unless you get those roles and responsibilities in place, I've been on boards where it has felt like the board, for whatever unhealthy reason, felt like they had to protect the organization from the leader. And you just had a lot of stagnation happen there.
Thank you, Tony. I'd like to stay with you for my next question, which is who should be involved in board recruitment and how can nonprofits lay the foundation for a successful recruitment process?
I think it's funny that I get asked this question because I think the very first time we met, I told you the exact reason why you should have a better job at this. I'll tell you the absolute worst way to do it. So whenever I was hired here, and again, this is a wonderful organization and a well-meaning board, but they had emotionally invested a lot of time in trying to find the new director. And after I was hired, and the board did a great job of vetting and spending their time, the chairman came up to me and said, yeah, now that you're hired, we just want to let you know that in the next 6 months, you're going to have to replace 7 of the 9 board members. And I had just moved to this community. So new to all organizations and trying to figure out how to do the board. So I'm actually going to give all props to Joan and Angie for this one because they put on a board member boot camp and I brought 3 of our board members to the boot camp at Parkland, and this question came up and they reinforced the idea and the principles that I always believed, but I was too timid in my tenure to say it to the board members. And they said that it is the board members' responsibility to recruit other board members. And I wanted to punch my board member in the arm and say, see, I told you, but it probably wouldn't be good for my employment here. So I think in all honesty, it's the board member's responsibility. The administrator should be brought into that conversation to make sure that all perspectives are addressed. But like everything else, I think it's a healthy collaborative of a board member and an administrator sharing ideas, perspectives, and looking at what the overall arching goals of the institution is. But I would say, really, I'm agreeing, and I'm just going to echo what Angie said years ago. It's the board member. It's the board member's responsibility.
Great. Thank you, Tony, for hitting on that point. I appreciate it. Carrie, can you tell us what steps can organizations take to identify their board needs and how can a board matrix help? So you've really hit already on the idea of constant, consistent recruitment, taking the long approach. So anything you'd care to add to that?
I was like, I feel like Tony and I met before this and like planned our Q&A so that built on each other. I think Tony proves the point about, I think board recruitment starts with data collection, right? So you have 7 seats open. There should be 30 people that you're considering for those 7 seats. You shouldn't be looking for those 7 people at the moment that you need them. And I think that data collection is this board matrix. I think you want for your board to understand what is their passion, like why did they pick you? Like what part of your organization speaks to them? Are they time, treasure, talent? Like which do they fit into with regards to how they want to best serve in that capacity? And then just, you know, the D&I, like all the different characteristics that you want to know to make sure that you're building a really diverse, well-rounded board. I would take it a step further and tell you, you've got that board matrix. And now you know, hey, 7 seats are opening up. You have a targeted 7 people you're trying to meet. You're not just trying to meet the next 7, but you've got gaps that you need to fill. You need to find people that kind of fill in those gaps. So this pipeline, I think, is equally important. That pipeline of people that you're meeting, you're connecting with, you get to know them. What are their skills? What are they passionate about? What are their characteristics? And then when those seats open up, you can take those 2 matrix and sit down and figure out who are the targeted 15 people we want to talk to fill these 7 board seats. So I think it's a big mistake to wait until the seat opens to really start that strategy, because then you're really putting your board at risk of not being strong and aligning to the mission and representing the community and the people you're trying to serve.
Great points, Carrie. Yes, I appreciate you hitting on that. Oftentimes we can approach this kind of at the 11th hour, you know, oh my gosh, these slots are open, but instead of getting away from that haphazard approach, kind of stepping back and getting some time and strategy behind it. Super, thank you. Next for Trina, can you tell us, how can organizations get past that mindset of just filling slots? So we have 7 slots open, let's fill those, but Instead, building a board with a strategic eye to the future.
I think one of the ways I would say it is, clearly we have great leadership. And I think that the summer was very profitable in that in terms of having a good strategic plan. So one of the things you want to know is, where does the organization or the, foundation want to go? I think knowing those things help you figure out placement of the proper people, but also identifying them. I agree to some level that we shouldn't just wait for the 9th hour. However, one of the things I liked is that when we talk about DEI, and I know that's one of the future questions, is I think diversity shouldn't just be a tagline. It shouldn't just be a add water mix, or let's just put this quota or put a Band-Aid to a potential problem. And then again, when you're looking at diversity and equity and inclusion of those things, I think what I liked about the board is there was not just an issue of, oh, do we have an attorney present? Do we have a campus community person present? Do we have a car or health representative present? It was really thinking broadly about the community, and again, I know that that's been a little bit of an issue even for our foundation. How do you get past Champaign and Urbana? Eastern St. Illinois is broader than that. How do you pull in others? And so I think that having a mindset to encompass more than just what's comfortable, I think helps a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Next question is for all three of the panelists, and you can answer in any order that you feel led, but it's the perennial question on probably everyone's mind today who registered to attend this session. How do you find these qualified candidates to serve on your board? So tips, secrets, things that we should know. Who'd like to jump in?
I'll jump in. I think one of the things I loved is, I think, again, when Tom Costello first sat down to talk to me, he said, okay, now that I'm having a conversation with you, I want you to kind of pay it forward in your head. Think about 5 other people that you know who would be interested or who are similar to you. And so while he recruited me, one of the biggest issues is I'm not a townie, but I feel like I'm kind of almost becoming an artificial one. I moved here in 2003, and I was here until 2011. I left in 2011 and went back to my beloved California for 3 years. But when I came back in 2014, I really wanted to know the community. I said, I want to do something different. I was here 8 years and I did not know the city or the community in which I lived. I wanted to immerse myself. And I'll be honest, I did. I started getting involved with doing a lot of community service, doing other things. But again, paying it forward, I immediately contacted other folks. And I'll be honest, I'm going to throw you out here, Miss Terica. But I reached out to a friend, and someone else had told me that Terica had also wanted to know more, do more in the community that she grew up in. And so for me, it was a matter of identifying individuals that were similar to me, or that folks that I knew who could also add value. Because it's not just replacing a seat. Can you bring value, or can you contribute, even if it's almost, if you will, not devil's advocate, because I ask a lot of questions, not to be antagonistic, but again, I'm an educator. And so I'm always constantly thinking. So I'm like, okay, well, let's think about this. How have we decided to present all of the recommendations or suggestions? I'm a person who really does not like groupthink. And I think often in our foundations, we get so comfortable, like, yeah, let me seem like I'm a team player, that I may not have presented the best option for us to go forward with.
Thank you, Trina. I'll open it up to Tony or Carrie. Same question. How do you find qualified candidates to serve on your board?
Well, I agree 100% with what Trina had said. I'm also a question asker. I think questions lead you to process. The why question is the best question that I think you can ask. So I will give all props back to the Community Foundation that they provided me with a board member needs Excel sheet that lays out basically criteria to ensure that we have the DEI representation on our board, as well as skill sets that are diverse in there. And so I think really when you start talking about recruitment, the very first question you need to be asking is where does this organization need to be in 2, 5, in 10 years? So what doors do we need to walk through? And who are those key holders that have access to those doors? So I think, honestly, I'm going to kind of just throw it back to what Trina said. I think you got to ask the questions. Where's our gaps? Where's our audience? Where's our vision? And that's going to lead you to where you should be recruiting.
Thank you, Tony. And that magical Excel sheet that Tony referenced, I would be happy to make that available to anyone who is joining us today. In fact, I'll attach it when I send a follow-up email to you. That's called our board matrix sheet. So I'm glad you found it helpful, Tony. Carrie, did you have other things to add on this question?
Yeah, I agree with everything Trina and Tony are saying 100%. I think the other place to look is people who are serving on committees that you're associated to, anyone who's working the events. You know, that's kind of the, I think, low-hanging fruit, I guess, like the people who are engaged at some level and maybe they need you to tap them on the shoulder to bring them to a new leadership skill. Like, give them that opportunity. I always think like the Emerging Community Leaders Program in Champaign County, like those are individuals who are raising their hand and saying, I want to learn about the issues that impact our community. I want to learn about the different organizations that are available in our community. They might not have a next step after that program. So kind of leveraging the Community Foundation, leveraging that program to find those people who are showing interest and maybe haven't gotten the opportunity, where they can bring that new innovative idea. They're fresh, they haven't been on a bunch of boards, they're excited, they're ready to participate. Like, we want them at the table too. And I think, you know, creating a board where you've got that advanced leadership, but also that new leadership working together creates a really unique opportunity for any board.
Excellent thoughts. I love thinking about your volunteer base as an organization and thinking through, you know, those volunteers who are maybe active in your events, as well as committees, thinking of how can you develop them into board members. Really good thoughts, everyone. I also wanted to just plug on behalf of the Community Foundation. We hear from nonprofits with board positions that you have when openings that are coming up, and we're occasionally approached by individuals who are wanting to serve on local boards. So recently, we developed a board match initiative to try to connect these two different audiences. So nonprofits, I'm going to put in the chat, and again, I will send it out in a follow-up email. This is just a little form that you would be welcome to fill out and to return it to us. That will help us to know what are your board needs this year in terms of strengths, skills, and many other qualities. Individuals who are interested in serving can fill out a similar form, which is available on our website. Completed forms we store on a secure folder in our OneDrive account so that we can share upon request with both nonprofits and individuals, so that you can directly contact each other and follow up with an organization or individual that fits your qualifications. So we did this last year and we're doing it in a different way this year. It is just for local nonprofits within the Community Foundation service area. So hopefully this will be of assistance. And again, I'll provide more information in a follow-up email about that. But you've all shared on some really good thoughts in terms of finding people. Trina, I love the idea of being recruited, getting passionate just in that initial meeting with Mr. Costello, and then thinking through, okay, I'm on board now. Who are my other, 4 or 5 people that I want to get involved in this because it's important to me. So I think to encourage and cultivate that kind of mindset within boards is super important, that it's not just about me, myself serving, but who can I bring from my circle of contacts that might also get interested in being an ambassador for this organization. So good thoughts. I'm going to move us along. I have a few more discussion questions, and then I will open it up to the audience for your questions to our panelists as well. So this question is back to Carrie. Carrie, what steps should organizations take to evaluate, nominate, and then elect their candidates? So you've already found, recruited some candidates, and now you got a pool. How are you deciding which ones should fill which slots? And what's the whole process look like?
Yeah, I think Tony and Trina have already kind of hit on this from a different angle, but I think it's asking those questions. I think if you have a real clear vision of like what you're needing on your board and what, hey, we've got 7 seats and this is what's missing, or we need a fresh voice, we need a new person. If you have a good understanding of what that is, then when you go meet with the people that that you've recruited, that you've kind of created, you can ask a lot of good questions to figure out what are they wanting out of a board spot. Are they wanting heavy participation, their voice at the table? Are they wanting to kind of sit back and learn? Different boards operate different ways. So I think that it's really important to ask a lot of good questions. I also think it's really important to set really clear expectations of what you expect from them. So is there a giving expectation? Do you want, from a donor perspective, something like that? A lot of times, kind of in talking to Becca, getting ready for this today, she said, a lot of times we reach out to people who aren't donors, but we do make that as part of the ask when they join our board. How do you feel about that as an organization? Like, how are you going to approach that piece of it? What are your expectations on attendance? When are your meetings? What are what are your expectations on participation? Do they need to show up at your events? Do they need to be out in the community advocating? People want to know that information. I think especially when people say, yes, sign me up, let me know what to do. I want to know how I'm being successful and how you're measuring my success as a board member. It is time that we're giving up to the organization. I want to know that I'm able to be successful in that space.
Thank you. Awesome, Carrie. And Trina, this next question is for you. How can organizations build a pipeline of potential board members with an eye to diversity and inclusion?
So it's kind of, it's the essential question that a lot of organizations are grappling with. And we know that DEI, if you will, work is needed, but it's also something that a lot of folks who are in those areas are really coming under attack, if you will, due to the area, if you will, the atmosphere that our current society is in. So I do want to preface that by saying that when we go out looking for diversity, we do need to realize that there's diversity fatigue, if you will, in terms of just hearing about it. Because again, it shouldn't be just a tagline, but a lot of folks are just feeling overwhelmed with the idea of adding, diversity and what does that mean? So I think it needs to start with a conversation, if you will, in the board in terms of, I've always believed this and I teach this in my classes, no matter what diversity won't work unless you have had that buy-in conversation. So again, the organization needs to start with saying, do you value diversity and what does diversity mean to you, or what should it look like? So I think that until upper management buys in, none of the efforts of diversity will, in my mind, be successful. Because again, folks who are in these diverse areas, and to me, diversity is way beyond just race and ethnicity. I think we often get, again, in that what my friend used to call Times New Roman thinking. So, the same old font that's there, it's like always pops up like, okay, that doesn't give you the opportunity unless you force the opportunity to change the font, if you will. So I try to remove the Times New Roman thinking to think, all right, well, beyond race and ethnicity, we need to think about age. And with a lot of boards, age is a big issue because, again, I know Angie's been great at this. Finding younger philanthropists is going to be very viable for our foundation, and not just relying on, if you will, a more seasoned group of folks. But also, if you think class, SES, ability, sexual orientation, there are various folks on the continuum, if you will, of sexuality. And I think those things broaden, again, ideas and conversations for how a board can move forward. So for me, I really caution organizations to just think, I don't have a woman, I don't have an African-American, I don't have a this, because even though you can have that woman or that person may not represent all, because again, African-American people are not monolithic, all women are not monolithic. And so again, you want to really break out of the zone of, I got one, as a token, but you want a valued person, and that person or persons joining need to feel like not an outsider within, but feel like a bona fide value organizational member, not like I'm just an appendage, because that serves no one. And that's a really big issue for a lot of folks. And I know for me, I've tried in my best, again, asking questions. I feel like, okay, if you want me and my diversity comes with a price. My diversity comes with a voice, and my voice needs to be at least acknowledged. Doesn't always have to be, taken into account, but at least should be heard.
Thank you, Trina. I love that, thinking about the much broader definition, encompassment of diversity. And I haven't heard it explained in the font term. So Times New Roman, love that. We use a ton of Garamond at the Community Foundation. Maybe we should branch out and use more Calibri but yes, absolutely agree with you so much on that. My last question is going to be to Tony, and then just a reminder to anyone who's on our call today, you are invited to share your questions with our panelists in the chat. So feel free to get those going right now. In the meantime, Tony, tell us, once new board members are elected, what do you think nonprofits should be doing to set their new board members up for success?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things that you can do, and I've learned this through a lot of trial and error, but I put together a small little list of them. So I think one of the top things is that you should have your board members meet with many of your key staff members of the organization and encourage them to come by infrequently, essentially to see how the sausage is made. I mean, to see the nitty-gritty parts of the business so they can understand the logistics of it. I think it's important to provide them with a board member orientation handbook that they can reflect back upon. It talks about basic history, bylaws, board requirements, and expectations, a quick rundown of programming and your funding sources, basic acronyms. We use a lot of acronyms over here that I'm still trying to figure out what they all mean. I think assigning them immediately a seasoned board member to serve as a mentor would be very helpful. I think that the administrator needs to be meeting with them semi-annually, if not quarterly, so that you can have those quality one-on-one times. Normally in my meetings, I have 9 people. They all have families. They want to get home after, my extremely innovative, intelligent wisdom. And so they can't wait to get away from it. So they run out the door and I don't have an opportunity to actually see them. So meeting with them one-on-one. I also think that while your newer members might be hesitant to speak up, you need to be calling on them specifically. You need to be asking them of what they think. Do you see any questions that we're not asking? Who's missing from these conversations? Who's not being represented in these discussions? I go back to, there's a leadership guy, his name's Andy Stanley, and he says that an individual's organizational IQ drops the longer they're in the organization, which simply means the longer you're in the box, the more you can't think outside of it. So you might think that you are this, but in the community, you're actually that. And so your new board members give you all kinds of feedback. It's I used to live in Decatur, and people would come and visit me and they would say, "What is that smell?" And I'd lived there for 20 years. What smell? So if I can use my hometown, it's your new board members are going to find the smell because you've been sitting in it and you don't recognize it. So those would be my 5 or 6 cents thrown in.
Excellent, Tony. Thank you. You gave us a lot of good points to consider in terms of the orientation, and yeah, keeping that mindset of your new people, how do you integrate them well into the group, but honoring the freshness that they bring and the different ideas and questions that they'll have for an organization. Well, thank you all. So great comments and feedback and suggestions. At this time, I would like to move us into a general question and answer session. And I see that a few questions have been submitted via the chat. I'd like to ask my colleague, President and CEO of the Community Foundation, Angie Hatfield-Marker, if she wants to jump in and share some of these participant questions with us.
Absolutely. So the first is some good suggestions where you might advertise for new boards. So I think both the nonprofits, where might they advertise for new board members, but also as community members, how can you get the word out that you might be interested in serving on a nonprofit?
For me, I talk to a lot. I'm always talking about the community foundation. So everyone in my department knows, and it's almost like a joke. Like, if you talk to her long enough, she'll recruit you. And I think, not that I would say a limit. I mean, I don't think the university or the campus should be the only area, but there's a lot of good pots there. And so I say that to say that maybe some of you have even, if you're a university employee, there's a emerging women leaders program. I know I participated in a while ago, but I know that there are several of folks that are, like Carrie mentioned earlier, just prime and ready and want to serve. So I think, again, our most popular places would be the university, Carl, Pravina, if you will. But I think that there are some other folks. I know that the executive club, in other areas, if you will. I think that there's a group, if you will, of attorneys and various esquires and law individuals. And so I think just having different pots to pull from, I mean, it's difficult because it says Champaign, Urbana. I know that it's not a wide, if you will, mapscape, but beyond just pulling administration from the campus, I would probably tap into maybe more other departments, because I think we often tend to look at, who's in leadership, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a person who's in leadership, who could have leadership qualities.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I would also say, talk about it. Like most, we live in a small community, at least a lot of us do. And I think if you share with your colleagues, with your mentors, with the people that you're working with, that you're looking for a board opportunity, or as a director, that you need board members. Like Tony said earlier, the board should recruit the board. If you tell that group of people, here's who we're looking for, who should I be meeting with? I'll go grab the coffee with them, but you tell me who are the great people in your network that I should be grabbing the coffee with. So either way, I think those personal connections give you the opportunity to say who you're looking for, what you really want to be a part of, and get closer to a good match out of the gate.
I would echo 100% what has been said. The only thing that I wanted to throw in there too is make sure you don't undersell your organization, because I've been guilty of that. When they're like, well, what's the commitment? And I will say, oh, it's only, you should never, ever start with that. It's never only, because I don't want just only people. I want advocates.
Great point. Thank you. What are some best practices for board engagement? I know the last couple of years it's been hard. Most of us haven't been able to meet in person, but any ideas you might have on how to keep your boards engaged?
Yeah, we had a really tough time with this one over the last 2 years. We've been 100% virtual at all board meetings. We found that throwing out a topic, like planning those board meetings, was really helpful. So we'd have a topic that we were ready to discuss, we wanted input on, and then we would break into small groups that would increase participation. When you're sitting on a call of 30, it's easy to kind of fall back, do something different. I think everybody's a little sick of Zoom at this point, so thanks for hanging with us today. But by splitting into smaller groups, it really forced more participation, got more ideas on the table, and got people energized about what we were talking about. So that worked really well, specifically in this kind of environment we find ourselves in right now.
I agree, it was difficult. I think that all the ideas would go back to pre-COVID, when I think even Angie and I were with Joan had invited us out to a Rotary, I think it was out in Monticello, if I'm not mistaken, but it was a social gathering. And I think there was a couple of social gatherings that happened even during COVID, but removing from just the board business was good. I think it allowed a newness to come in, or a fresh rain kind of thinking. I would agree that, folks are tired of COVID, and, the COVID fatigue is real. But then I think as I've been looking at some of the new research, is that unfortunately this technology has really broadened the way folks are looking at organizations and businesses. So to some degree, I think it's going to be here to stay. So how do we make this technology work for us? And so I think what Carrie mentioned is great, to have those breakout rooms. And now, of course, folks are getting more savvy at how to do the breakout rooms. I would, so a part of another couple of organizations that I'm a part of, we did, one of us did the Kahoot, if you will, game night, just to kind of get folks thinking. But another organization did a virtual game night when it was literally, they had us running around the house finding items for a scavenger hunt. And you would think that that wouldn't be so much fun, but I can tell you folks got competitive. And again, then we were able to go back to the business at hand. So I think just a matter of mixing what we used to say in organization is task with social. So having a little social to bring about the task and more clarity for that task.
I would agree. I think Zoom's been very difficult. What we have tried to do over here is put more flesh on the organization by bringing in persons served and reminding the board of what we're fighting for. So we would have people come in and join us and say what has been some successes or what's been some needs. And I do want to commend my board, because one of the best things that they have done is rally around our staff during this time. And they realize they are helping the helpers. And that really has been, they've taken ownership over our team to protect them and their mental wellness. So it's been really great.
How do you ask your board to participate in sharing their time, talents, and treasures? And would any of you be willing to share your organization's give, get, so you're donating or fundraising policies?
I know that we believe in 100% participation, and I love that. It has not changed. I think that, again, as with our leadership has said, when it was Joan, with Angie, it means something to say that the board is 100% invested. And I think that for me, even if I forget because we're all busy, I love the fact that there's gentle reminders to remind you, to let you know this is important. This is not something that is small, but however, I also like, to some degree, the open-ended amount. I don't like where you have to pressure folks, because the moment that you pressure folks, it gets to be, I would say, very, very complex. Because I think that, for instance, my husband was on a board, and I remember he really liked the board, but there were some expectations financially that were not that we couldn't meet it, but it was also in addition to that, it was like, okay, well, also give us 5 other friends who can give a higher amount of money. And I thought, oh my goodness. And for myself, as well as my husband, we were thinking, do we really want to go and pull in our network to, if you will, require them to give a certain amount of money, as opposed to just, it should still be, donations. And if you think about this, donations are from the heart, if you will, or philanthropy should be about not pity, but clearly contributing to a need, if you will, that you feel you could take care of. And so I think that, and I don't know, please help me, Angie or Genevieve, if there's something I'm not clearly articulating about our foundation, but I really am very proud of the way that we give. I don't think there's I don't feel like there's hesitancy or there's this teeth pulling, like, oh, I have to do this. But I do believe the requirement is there, the 100% participation. And I make sure that everyone that I recruit say, this is required. You do need to do a yearly, if you will, donation. Now with others, I'm constantly trying to show where the monies go to assist the need in the community.
Yeah, I agree. I think it goes back to that setting expectations. If when you are asking board members to join you, if you're telling them that there is, our hope is that we have 100% participation at whatever level you're comfortable. Like, maybe it's not a set amount, but we want people who are advocating for us, who believe in our mission to the point that they're willing to support it financially. If you're in a situation where you haven't had that, so you've got an existing board that you like that's not participating, I think it's asking them for that brainstorm of, hey, I'd love to have 100% participation. I'd love to have this part of our mission. What do you guys think? How do we evolve to that type of model and invite them to the table to collaborate and decide to start kind of changing the way that your organization approaches that piece?
I can be really quick. You have the community foundation come and say everything that you want to do, because they will come over and do a board member development. And just like your own kids, your kids don't listen to you until the stranger down the street says the same thing. So you have Angie show up and say everything that you've been telling them, and then they go, that's amazing. And you also apply for a community grant and you show them that little question that says, what percentage of your board members financially give to your organization? And you go, I wonder why they're asking this.
You know, we didn't pay Tony very much to come speak tonight, just a little bit to talk us up. Thank you, Tony. Absolutely. You know, it lends vital credibility to our organization that our board participates wholly in our fundraising and our effort. And as a grant making organization, it's equally important to expect the organizations that we're granting to, you know, to do that if we're not doing that. So appreciate those points. And yes, we'll come anytime to chat with boards and encourage them to support. So the next question, let's see here. Do any of the speakers today offer mentorship for executive directors or CEOs? And Genevieve, maybe I'll throw that to you if you want to touch on just our executive director leadership network.
Sure, I'd be happy to plug that. And any panelists would be invited to share as well if you personally do any coaching for executives. But at the Community Foundation, we want to support local executive directors with resources and trainings. We called this a support group in the past, and now it is a leadership network, in that we're bringing you together peer-to-peer for facilitated discussions once a month, held on the second Thursday of the month from 12 to 1 p.m. and on a topic of interest to executive directors. So it's not necessarily a one-on-one model, it's a group cohort, but we found that many participants really benefit from knowing you're not alone, that it's hard work, that it's valuable work, and also hearing how are you approaching whatever the topic is, whether it's fundraising or if it's board relationships, strategic planning. Our next session will actually be on well-being and self-care, a very important topic 2 years into this pandemic. So anyone who's interested in that, or if you're wondering if your executive director is in the loop, I'd be happy to get them involved in that.
I do, and I do private consulting, if you will, through my own individual Right Way Consulting. And so I work with other nonprofits and also for-profit organizations. Again, you know, it depends on what the need is. And so it's a matter of trying to figure out if that's something that I can assist with it, or if it's something that others need. So I'm open if I can help.
Yes, thanks, Trina. Okay, what about, how do we determine the ideal number of board members? It's a good question. Typically, it's in the bylaws of your organization, but how do you determine that number for your bylaws? And I guess our panelists, I would ask you to share how many board members serve for your organization and how you feel that number works to your advantage or disadvantage.
I feel like I should know this number off the top of my head, so I hope that they're not on the call with us today. Paula, don't tell on me. I think we're at like mid-20s, 20, 25 board members at the United Way. I think the pro to that is you have a lot of hands on deck. I think the con to that size board is it's very easy to be quiet, right? So I think it's really thinking through what you want from your board members. How much do you need them? And sometimes smaller can be mightier because of that, you know, need to participate, because there's not as many people that could raise their hand.
I am trying to recall, but I thought we were more like 15, 16 board members. And
Right now, yep.
okay, I was trying to recall that. I'm not sure what the magical number is, if you will, but I know that I like it being an odd number. And I'll say why that, because again, when you're taking up a vote or if you're thinking through things, you don't want it to be so even. If I could come up with but I also don't believe it should be large. That's another reason. So I would say 15 to maybe at the most, and this is really pushing it, probably 17 to 19 people. But again, the more individuals, the more complexity, the more difficult to set up or arrange time in meetings. And so you do want a difference of ideas, but you also don't want it to the point where you can't get work done because you have too large of a group to work through. And so I don't know. I think we're a good number, and maybe again, I could be a little comfortable, but I don't think so, because I think our board has been smaller at times. And so I think we're at a good spot. And I really like a lot of our new board members. They've brought in a lot of new energy, fun energy.
So our board is currently at 9, and while it's nice that you can have that mobility, our bylaws obviously require a quorum. So here in Monticello, if there is a girls away basketball game, I have no quorum because they're all gone. So not all of them, but I lose my quorum. The other nonprofits that I'm a part of, they're anywhere between 15 to 21, which I think is a good number. While I am introverted, I do want to have a deeper relationship with my board members. And I think that if you went into the 20s, that regular face-to-face contact, so you get to continue to hear as time progresses their passions and their desires, it might make it hard to continue to harvest that if you go into the 20s.
Okay, thank you. Genevieve, do we have time for one more? How are we doing on time?
Yes, I think we can take one more and then I'll wrap us up.
Okay, so Jason's curious if any of your organizations have recruited board members from program participants or populations served.
I'll just quickly jump in and say we strive to make, again, one of those boxes for representation. We do try to have at least a parent, guardian, or person served. I think it's a vital, who better can tell you what you are than the frontline people? So I had an opportunity at one point to do a tour at Salt Light, and there was an individual that was working there that had a disability, and the person that was leading the tour impressed so much upon me by just reminding me everybody has a purpose and everybody can contribute. And I've never forgotten that after 15 years of that tour. And so I say the same thing about people served and the participants. Everyone has a purpose and everyone can contribute to the team.
Again, I would say that yes, we have, because again, when I joined the foundation, I think in 2018, I recall the folks that were giving the educational moment were folks that were previous board members, but also previous folks who were recipients of grants, if you will. And so I think that what I loved about the foundation, it wasn't classes in this way that only a certain type of person could be a board member. And I appreciated that. I like looking at, again, the flexibility. I think that you can recruit or identify a qualified person from where you do serve. I know that there, again, I am a part of several different groups, and I'm constantly trying to identify individuals who could best contribute, serve, or assist the foundation in going even further.
Yeah, I agree with Trina. I feel like we take the same exact approach. Like there's everybody has a perspective. Every perspective needs to be at the table. And I think we do a really good job of making sure that we have to the best of our ability, all of those voices and making the decisions and kind of deciding where dollars should be allocated.
Super. Well, thank you all for the good questions. I know there were a couple that we missed, but for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. You would be most welcome to email me. My email is in the text. We'd be happy to follow up with you if there are any additional questions. I would like to just again express our appreciation to our panelists today, Carrie, Tony, Trina. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and your busy schedules to share your knowledge with the group today. Thank you so much. And just a quick announcement about what we have coming up. Our next board boot camp, we're holding this series quarterly this year. It's scheduled for Wednesday, April the 20th at 12 noon. We are planning to hold this session in person. So we are hoping to jump out of these Zoom boxes and actually connect in person. It will be held in the Westminster Hall of the First Presbyterian Church Champaign, which is just across the West Side Park from our office at the Community Foundation near downtown Champaign. This session will be for current and aspiring board officers. So we're going to talk about the role of officers and then so chairs, vice chairs, treasurers, and secretaries. And then we're planning a breakout session so that you can convene with other like officers of local nonprofits to ask questions, hear what's working well from you, share tips and strategies on your officer duties in small groups that will be facilitated by some of our own officers at the Community Foundation. So an excellent opportunity for those of you who are already board officers wanting to hone skills, share strategies, or for those on your board who are possibly interested in taking that next step in leadership and becoming an officer, but want to learn the ropes first from some of those who are already doing it. So I will share the registration link for this event with all of our registrants for today's event in a follow-up email, as well as some of the other deliverables that I mentioned, that word matrix in a follow-up email, hopefully tomorrow. So we hope to see you in person, April 27th. Thank you again for attending today. One more thank you to our panelists. Hope you have a good evening and have a good night. Thank you.